I'm a medical herbalist, and I've been helping people with chronic fatigue and other illnesses for about 25 years. And I really wanted to help people to help themselves, because there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of mainstream help when it comes to understanding what is chronic fatigue and how do people recover from it. So let's start with the stress part. I think we'll all agree, I think everyone who's watching this will agree, that we live in a crazy world, and it only seems to be getting busier and crazier. And I think if I had to ask any of you, if you know anyone who's not stressed out, probably you'll say, no, I don't know anyone who's not stressed out. And then if you go on from there, we could say, well, it's estimated, and this is by the American Chronic Fatigue Society, it's been estimated that between 17 and 24 million people suffer from chronic fatigue and or ME across the world. So that's a very significant number, 17 to 24 million people suffering from fatigue. So when I talk to my patients, and they invariably give me a very similar story, when they've gone to see their doctor with symptoms or diagnosis of chronic fatigue or ME or burnout or post-viral fatigue or possibly even long COVID, invariably they will say that their doctor runs all the tests and says there's nothing wrong with you. And that's very disheartening for someone to hear, and also very invalidating. It's not the doctor's fault. It's because they don't, or shall we say, we don't have tests to actually absolutely diagnose chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic fatigue. So I say to the patient, well, there is something wrong with you. You know there's something wrong with you because you're tired all the time, or your body's in pain. Really what the doctor ought to say is, I can find nothing wrong with you. And my belief is that it comes a lot from the adrenals. With mainstream medicine, they don't really focus on the adrenals at all. They focus on the two extreme ends. So there's Cushing's and then there's Addison's, but the normal everyday adrenal fatigue, which I would hazard a guess that almost most GPs suffer from themselves, that if you call it burnout, that doesn't seem to really land on the radar of mainstream medicine. So that's what this book is about, really. And in this book, I'm not saying that I know why everyone gets ill. All it is, it's a distillation of 25 years of working with this condition, helping a lot of people through it. And also, when I was invited to write the book, I researched as deeply as I possibly could into understanding what is really going on right down at a cellular level. So really, with all this stress, which impacts our body and gives us fatigue, ultimately the goal is to try to find that sense of that inner peace and that resilience as we live in our crazy world. And in that way, hopefully, finding our sense of inner peace and resilience in the crazy world, that it can, infect other people in a positive way. And so we can perhaps have a more peaceful, more resilient world. So let's talk about the book and what is it all about. So the book really is divided into three parts. And the first part, I'm looking at how stress makes us ill, and in particular, how it predisposes us towards developing ongoing fatigue problems, such as chronic fatigue or ME or burnout or post-viral fatigue or long COVID even. So I have found that my patients are very educated, and they want to understand in detail what's going on and how they got to become so ill. So I have used a lot of scientific studies to back up my theories and what I'm writing about, and I haven't dumbed it down at all. However, I'm used to speaking to patients, and so medical speak is a whole other language. So what I do is I convert medical speak into English so that the reader can understand the concept and even perhaps almost imagine what's going on right inside your cells, so that you can get a picture of not only what's going on, but also what you need to do to recover. Because you see, there's the thing is, if you got there, you can come back from that. Why not? Why not? So the main point is that I wrote this book to help people to help themselves. And I wrote it as if you are my patient. So I wrote it with the feeling, I wanted you to feel as if I'm there, holding your hand, helping you through, giving you tips, giving you recipes, giving you reassurance as well. And although I give you as much information as I can, I really have to emphasize this book cannot take the place of a doctor, nutritionist, naturopath, a medical herbalist, or some professional who really understands and knows about chronic fatigue or about ongoing severe fatigue. So let's have a look at the part one. How does stress make us ill? And we can go back in time, way back in time, to when we were a caveman or living in a clan, perhaps in a cave. And let's imagine you have some cattle, if they did in those days, you have some cattle, and the clan from over the hill and across the valley comes and steals all your cattle. Well, what you do, but you all race out and you have a little war, and you retrieve your cattle and you go back to your cave. Maybe you even get some of their cattle as well. You go back to your cave and you all sit around, you laugh about it, and the stress is over. And the same might be you walking along and suddenly the bear pops out, you know, and oh my God, what you do, you either run up a tree or you run away or you fight the bear off with your spear, but somehow you survive, you come back to your people, you tell them all about it, everyone's very impressed, and down go all your stress hormones. That's how we're supposed to live, you know, with generally just puddling along in our life, and then something happens, or we rise to the challenge. The challenge is dealt with and everything calms down again. But the problem is today, we live with that bear in front of us all the time. So we've got the traffic jams and the bills coming in, the kids have to get somewhere on time. You know, there are just deadlines to meet. There are endless things, so that almost constantly our cortisol and adrenaline is up. There's news, you know, nowadays we don't only know about what's happening in our immediate environment, but the whole world has become, through the news, our immediate environment, and all the sadness and the tragedy of the world comes into our home. And so we're dealing with these stresses and these upsets constantly. So this means that our stress hormones are always up, and this has not a very good effect on us at all. So in 1936, there was a very eminent endocrinologist called Hans Saley, and he developed this concept called general adaptation syndrome, GAS. And he broke down the response to stress into 3 phases. So first of all, you're fine. Then the stress comes your way, so you respond with alarm. Then you adapt to that, and you're coping, you're doing it. But if the stress carries on too long, you then get to the position of exhaustion. And that's when the body and the health starts to break down. And we see this pattern over and over again. So the types of stress can be any type of stress. Classically, people who develop chronic fatigue, they tend to be, they call them type A personality, the 110%ers, the people who work hard and play hard. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be people who are caring for someone who's ill on an ongoing basis. It might be that there are toxins in your home or mold in your home. It could be physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, the breakdown of a marriage. In young people, it's sometimes the death of a beloved grandparent. So any sort of stress. But in 2018, a Dr. Martin Picard, they did a study on psychological stress, and they found that even ordinary stress, that we would call ordinary stress, such as adverse child events, discrimination, job strain, emotional states, caregiving, even social isolation can damage our mitochondria. And our mitochondria are those little organelles within our cells, which are, they call the powerhouse of the cell. They are the part of the cell that generates that our energy currency called the ATP. And when they're damaged, you don't generate so much ADP, and so you become fatigued. So how, again, let's look at just one hormone. Let's look at cortisol and what happens when cortisol is elevated. Cortisol has an enormous impact on our health. So when we get stressed, our adrenaline goes up, our cortisol goes up. And then when our cortisol goes up, it impacts our immune system by pushing it down. And we know that even in mainstream medicine, they use cortisone to push down the immune system so that you can have organ transplants, that the immune system doesn't attack. So it's a very successful hormone at bringing down the immune system, but it doesn't bring it down completely. It kind of skews the immune system. So part of the immune system are these cells called T helper cells, and it's a bit like a seesaw. You've got Th1, T helper cell 1, and T helper cell 2, and they work like a seesaw, and they go, one goes up over 12 hours and one goes up over the other 12 hours. So you've got the Th1, that's your antiviral aspect, and the Th2, which is more your allergic autoimmune aspect. Now, when you have too much cortisol, what you find is the Th2 goes down, and because it's a seesaw, sorry, the Th1 goes down, and because it's a seesaw, the Th2 goes up. And what you often find in ongoing fatigue is that your antiviral side is down, therefore you are more vulnerable to viruses attacking you, and your allergic side goes up, and so therefore you become more histaminic. So you can see how stress really makes you so much more vulnerable to viruses like glandular fever, cytomegalovirus, and COVID as well. Cortisol is generated in the adrenal glands, and when we're constantly on red alert, we're pumping out cortisol all the time, and our adrenal glands can even shrink. And now we start thinking about what happens to the reproductive system. Well, in order to create cortisol, our body generates cortisol. It goes from cholesterol, becomes pregnenolone, becomes progesterone, and then becomes cortisol. So when we've run out of cortisol, our body's quite clever. It goes down to the ovaries and steals the progesterone from the ovaries, so it's got ready-made, half-made cortisol. And in that way, what's happening is the body is rather choosing survival over reproduction. And so what happens is you find a lot of women who've been stressed out over a while, they have estrogen dominance, not because they've got too much estrogen, although there is too much estrogen in the water. You've got the progesterone and estrogen also in balance, but now because the progesterone has been stolen to be able to support the adrenal glands, the progesterone goes down, and so the estrogen then is in dominance, and that comes with its own set of symptoms. So we can also look at what happens with the digestive system. So we have our voluntary our voluntary nervous system, which means I pick up my pen, and the involuntary nervous system, which then controls all our bodily functions, such as our adrenals and also our digestive system. So when you are relaxed, you're more in parasympathetic system dominance. That we shortcut it and say rest and digest. When you're very upset, you're in sympathetic, that's fight and flight. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but if you've had an argument, you just can't eat. Your digestive system is just shut off. So when we're living in a state of high stress, our digestive system is not secreting all the enzymes as it ought to do. And so when we eat, the food goes down into our stomach and into our intestine, but there's not enough digestive enzymes to break it all down. So it sits a bit like a brick in the stomach. You feel like it's just not going down. And then that food starts to ferment because it's a warm, moist environment. There's not enough hydrochloric acid to kill all the bacteria. So it starts to ferment. You get bloating, you get burping. Those bacteria start to produce endotoxins. It leaks into the bloodstream. You start to feel headaches. you might get joint pain, you might get physical fatigue. And so you can see how stress can make people, quite often they say to me, I feel poisoned. And they're not poisoned, but in a way they are poisoned. And that's because the stress is cutting off their ability to digest their food. When the bacteria secrete all these endotoxins, those toxins then inflame the gut lining, and then the gut isn't even able to absorb the nutrients. So the person then becomes not really malnourished, but devitalized. They're not able to receive the nutrients from their food. So this is all rather scary, but never mind, it can be repaired. So in my book, in part 2, I discuss how can you get better again? And having explained how stress makes you ill and set the scene so you really understand why, I then build on that, showing you how you can get better. And the most important thing, there are 2 really important things. The one is to honor your body. So I say to people, the body is wiser than the mind, you know. So your mind, especially when you are one of those 110%ers, you'll be doing something and you're working and working, and you start to feel tired, but you learn to ignore that little signal until eventually you can't even hear that I'm tired. You can't hear your body saying, I'm tired, please stop. It's just you've become deaf to it. So you have to relearn to listen to your body. And when your body says, I'm tired, you have to honor your body and say, okay, I'm going to stop. I don't have to finish this. Quite frankly, it will not make all that much difference to my life if I finish it tomorrow. I'm going to stop. I'll have a little rest, and then I can carry on. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing, so many things I teach you about how to look after yourself with regard how to sleep, because a lot of people can't sleep, even though they're so tired, they can't switch off their mind at all. So they're sort of wired and tired. So I show you, what do you need to do to sleep? And one of the things is that people, they're not able to, when they've used up their blood sugars, they're so exhausted, they're not able to convert the glycogen into glucose again. And so their blood sugars drop during the night. They wake up with a start, because when your blood sugars drop, your body recognizes that as an emergency. So they wake up with a start and then they can't sleep. And so I make a little suggestion of little tiny meals that you can keep next to your bed. So when you wake up, you can drink maybe some really sloppy, warm porridge that you've kept in a thermos flask. Just drink a bit of that. And that gives your body just enough blood sugar and comfort to then drop off to sleep again. So I've packed this book with as many recipes and self-help tips as I possibly can. So I've emphasized herbs and foods that you can either grow in your garden or grow on your windowsill or find in your kitchen. And I've tried to make it extremely doable. I've explained the benefits of certain foods and why these would be really helpful for you. Loads and loads of herbs are discussed in the book. And I also give you all sorts of foods, recipes, and remedies to help your adrenal system, your nervous system, your sleep, your immune system, your mitochondria, antiviral recipes. I even discuss some newly discovered body system called the endocannabinoid system, which is absolutely fascinating. I also talk about lifestyle tips. So, for instance, again, some people are so stressed out, but they say that they've got brain ache, but they can't switch their brain off. So it's like they're wired and tired. And then I talk about certain things that you can, like certain musics or frequencies called solfeggio frequencies, which you can just find on your phone and plug it in or have it next to you. And these instantly bring calm to your brain. So your brain waves plug in to those brain waves, and instead of, you've rather got these calm, healing brain waves. If you don't like the solfeggio music, you might want to tune in just to white sound to block off all the traffic sounds or the aeroplane sounds or the noisy sounds from outside your home. Or you might prefer green sound, which is more, it's a deeper sound, more like wind, or sometimes people like to use background ambience. So one of the two songs that I really like to play, one is it's like a medieval monastery scriptorium. So then you hear that's the quill on the paper, and then in the background you've got some monks charming, and then you can hear the crackling of the candles. So it just takes you to a different world. Another ambience that I like to choose is a wooden cabin on a stormy night in the forest, the crackling fire. So you just hear this lovely crackling sound of the wind, but it just quietens your brain because you're focusing on that and not all sorts of other very stressful events that are going through your mind. So the last part, in the part 2, shall we say, we also talk about pacing. You know, back in the day, they used to try and build up your stamina, but this is not a condition of where the person is lazy or not fit. It's a problem where the mitochondria are very damaged. And so the more you try and push, the more backward you're going to go. So pacing really is the name of the game, where you do a little, rest a little, do a little, rest a little. And then in the book, using the herbs and the foods to nourish and heal your body and repair your body. So in the last part 3, I discuss why are we living like this, and how can we live differently. So I think the modern day world is quite mad, and we've become more and more like headless chickens, running around trying to get everything done, looking at our phones and manically trying to get everything done. And then the media provide us with, constantly with bad news. So we're constantly feeling uncertain and fearful. But I remind myself and I remind everybody that the world has ever been thus. Really, it's always been like this. And so myself, I don't have a television, I don't buy the newspaper. I detach myself from that which I have no control over. And I focus on that which I do have control over. So the people I speak to, the people I help, my family and friends, that's where I pay attention. And I just get on with my own life and try to live in a manner that's peaceful and that can, what I would call sustainably, so that I can live like this forever. So one of my favorite authors and scientists is Bruce Lipton, and he famously showed us how our thoughts influence our biology. So this is important because what we listen to and what we pick up does affect our biology. And he used cells, so he'd use stem cells, and he'd grow stem cells and they'd all grow into the same thing because he put them in the same agar medium. What he discovered is when he changed the medium, the same exactly genetically identical cells would grow into different things depending on the medium. And what he found is when he observed the cells is that if he put them in a toxic medium, the cells would shut down and retreat, of course. If you put them into a nutritive medium, they would open up and they would move towards the nutrition and they would grow. And of course, you can't shut down and grow at the same time. So the point is, right down to a cellular level, you've got to make sure that the medium that you surround your cells, that's yourself, and every one of your 50 trillion cells should be nutritious and nourishing and beneficial to you. So this is not only on a biochemical level with regard to herbs and foods, but also it's on an emotional, mental level. And one of my other favorite scientists is Rupert Sheldrake, and he showed how thoughts and energies affect us so very much, even though we're distant from them. So, for instance, he spoke about pets who know when their owners are coming home long before they could possibly hear the car. Or he spoke about the sense of being stared at as well, that we can pick it up. Even Albert Einstein spoke about something called spooky at a distance, where if two cells were in contact with each other and then separated over many miles, whatever happened to one, the other one would respond exactly the same. And if you look at where our Earth comes from, we were apparently a tiny pea. Our whole universe was just the size of a pea. And then there was the Big Bang and it exploded. So the point is we are all connected, and therefore, you know, we can pick up and feel what's going on around us. So I say to people, make sure that the energy that you surround yourself with is nourishing and nurturing, because energies are contagious. So if you're in an environment that is breaking down and knocking you down, it's not really conducive for getting well. So there is an interesting author as well, Dan Buettner. He wrote a book called The Blue Zones. And he wanted to explore why there are certain areas in the world where people really thrive well into their 90s, past 100. What are they doing that they are living so well? And he found 5 zones. There was Greece, Japan, Sardinia, America, and in South America as well, some communities. And he looked at the commonalities between these zones. And what he found is that the people who lived in these blue zones, and the reason he called them blue zones is he had a big map and he'd circle them in blue. And so they were called the blue zones. What he discovered is the people who live in these blue zones, they all have a sense of purpose. So when you get old, you're not just sitting in front of the television, doing nothing, living a purposeless life. No, you have a purpose. You belong to the community. You may be looking after the children, or you might be growing the vegetables, or you might be giving advice or helping people who are going through difficult times. They had a purpose. The other thing these people did is they moved physically, but not working out madly at the gym. They might be walking their goats over the hill, or they might be growing their vegetables, or they might be kneading bread or picking up the kids from school. They had a sense of belonging. They belonged in a community. They made sure that they took time out. They might take time out for their prayers, or they might take time out for a siesta. They also didn't eat too much. They ate till they were 80% full. They didn't eat till they were completely full. And most of them enjoyed a glass of wine, which of course is quite relaxing. They also ate mostly a vegetarian diet. So this just puts out an illustration of a way to live, a model perhaps that we could model our own lives on, where, we can live within this world, but perhaps live in a way that's more sustainable and is going to give us a healthy, long-term life for a long, long time. Another thing I discovered a long time ago, I wrote my master's degree dissertation on chronic fatigue syndrome. And I found out that in my sample group, a lot of the people who developed ME were what you might call people. They call themselves people pleasers. They weren't walking their own path. They were doing something that some authority figure, perhaps a parent, had said, well, this is the way that you should live your life and that'll be good. And so they weren't really living in a way that was true to themselves. And then they had recovered, and I said, what was the turning point to help you recover? And every one of them said to me, when I put down what other people expected of me, and I started walking my own path. So they really did things that sung to their soul. It might have been perhaps music or the arts or nature, I don't know, whatever it was that they chose to do, but they did something that sung to their soul. And all of a sudden, they felt, I think they came back into alignment with who they really were. And therefore they started getting stronger and stronger and better again. The other thing I think that's really, really important is to get back to nature. We have something called nature deficit disorder, And so I think this is something that's quite well understood. When I first started speaking about it, that was only about 10 years ago, really. It was quite a foreign concept. But now I think people really, most of us agree that we are, well, we have been divorced from nature, but I think the tide has already turned and we're going back to nature. Coming back to nature has really actually measurable effects on our health. And we can do simple things, we can walk barefoot, we can go gardening, you can talk to the pets, you can feed the wild birds, you can just sit and look at the trees and the wind. There's endless ways to get back to nature. And that then brings us back to our sense of peace and our sense of resilience. Because when and it comes back again to Bruce Lipton, we can't thrive in a crazy world. We have to find our place of peace and our place of resilience. And within that place of peace and resilience, nurture ourselves both, with our food, with our herbs, with our thoughts, with what we're doing with our life. And in that way, we can get over our world weariness, our fatigue, our exhaustion, and, come to living really a full and healthy and vibrant, resilient life. So thank you very much. Okay. Well, first of all, you've got to look at why your adrenals are so exhausted. And, there is a study that showed people who are very stressed out, their adrenals actually shrink. Can you believe that? So the first thing you've got to do is address your stress before you do anything else. You might want to look at your lifestyle, or you might want to use herbs which calm you down. The other thing I say to people, the most important thing to think about, mood and food, right? So feeling calm, feeling happy with who you are and with who you're with. And the other thing is the way you eat. So people who have adrenal fatigue, like I said, they don't seem to be able to balance their blood sugar levels. So their blood sugars can plummet. And we'd all know that there's that term hangry, hungry/angry, because their blood sugars have absolutely plummeted. So I say to people, eat little meals every 2 hours, keep eating. So then you've got lovely, even blood sugar levels. And then you feel on much more stable ground. And in that way, your adrenals are not going, it's an emergency, my blood sugars have dropped, like that. So keeping your blood sugars nice and even. And then watch what you're watching on, what are the films you watch, watch things that are calm and peaceful. Make sure you're doing things that make your soul sing, really. And of course, there are lots, in my book, I've given a lot of herbs which are really restorative to the adrenal glands as well. But before you do any of that, you've got to calm down. And most of us don't really feel calm. We've almost forgotten how it feels to feel calm. Well, if I give myself as an example, I work full time. Um, can I just, is Paige there? Does she like her work? Enjoy your work, Paige? No, not really. Yeah, that's really difficult, isn't it? And so many people find themselves in that position. So, if I can use myself as an example, I love my work, but I do work very, very hard. But if I'm feeling burnt out, because it does happen, I get quite, it happens. I will go to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening. I think nothing of it. I might have a lovely bath. I'll put all sorts of beautiful herbs or oils in my bath. I eat very nourishing, healthy food, and I'll go to bed. Now, I don't say I fall asleep, but I might just go to bed. I'll read a really nice book, and I might even take some valerian or something so that I sleep very well. And in that way, I'm really nourishing and nurturing myself. In the case of Paige, she's not happy. It is difficult to work where you're not happy. So either I would say, if you're able to change or start looking for something that makes you feel more content and nourished, or if that is not a possibility, okay, you have to work to bring in the dollar, as it were, but in your other time, perhaps there you can do things that really make your soul sing. And it has such an effect on your health. And then, of course, again, in the book, loads of herbs, loads of foods that help to nourish yourself. But I would say that's not enough. You've got to be content in your life. You have to be. Otherwise, you're chipping away all the time, and you might be filling it up, but it's a bucket with holes in it. So try to find joy and contentment in your life, even if it's not in your earning part of your life, but the other part of your life. You know, if you can go out and walk in nature and think, oh, well, at least I'm earning some money and I'm able to afford this. That's offsetting one against the other. Well, the keto diet is quite good. I mean, they're using it especially to help with insulin resistance. But I think with people who are very, very fatigued, you do need carbohydrates, but you need the right carbohydrates, you know. So I say to people, root vegetables are so full of nourishment and goodness. So I think perhaps it wouldn't be my first choice. However, I wouldn't be going for what you might call junk carbs, like, you know, obviously sweets, crisps, white bread, all that is not ideal. But if you were to have your protein, your healthy fats, and very good quality carbs, like, for instance, sweet potato, butternut, celeriac, you know, those are porridge oats, for instance, which is, it has good carb, but it's so nourishing for the body. The very fatigued body needs that carb to keep it going. But you don't want to have an only carb diet. It must be a balance, really. But I wouldn't be going for high sugar. That is not helpful, because that's something I talk about in the book. It's a modern day world, you know, where you might have a coffee and a croissant, okay, and you feel, oh, you feel amazing. Your blood sugar's up there. You can take on the world. And then the insulin kicks in and down it goes. Then you feel like that. So maybe you have a cup of tea or coffee and a sandwich, whoops, up you go again. And so you're living like this, which is not good. The keto, of course, it's nice and like that, but I still think you need those carbohydrates, you know, to nourish the cells. So yeah, I must emphasize, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm a medical herbalist. I probably wasn't the best person to answer, but just in my capacity as a herbalist, I'll say that's what I think. So just one question at a time. How long? That is a piece of string, really. If I find if people it's a rough. If people have had um, some sort of fatigue for less than 2 years, I have, fingers crossed, invariably they've made a full recovery. But the longer it goes on, the longer it is to recover from. Although I have known people to have fatigue for a very long time and recover, but it's not a quick fix. You know, the herbs are restoring a very damaged system, and then we're adjusting the lifestyle and adjusting the diet. It's quite interesting because, and no offense to the person who made the question, because this might not be on your mind, but I have so often seen that people say to me, I just want to get back to my old life. And I say, no, because that's why you got here. You don't realize it, but I explained to them that living the life that you did there, that's how you got into this position. So now we want a new life for you, a better life for you. And then if people who try and bust their way out of it, they don't get better. They almost slip back. So it's about so much about being kind to yourself, and you nourish yourself back to health. How long that will be is very individual. If you've just got it, you usually can get better a lot more quickly. If you've had it for a very long time, 20 years, it's much more difficult then to get better. Now, long COVID, in my book, there are some fascinating studies that showed, and in fact, I sort of quoted one of them in the talk, where they found just ordinary stress, including social isolation, predispose people to damaging the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is that part of the cell that generates our energy. When that is damaged, and that is damaged, and it's usually, let's imagine it looks like that. If it's sort of, it actually gets distorted. If that gets distorted through the effect that stress has on the body, the effect that stress has on our physiology, therefore our chemistry, how it affects our mitochondria and makes us vulnerable to the COVID and then the long COVID. And really what you're seeing is massive inflammation through the body. You know, as you've probably read, brain inflames, really. So you've got to calm down all that inflammation, restore the distorted mitochondria, and then, you know, regenerate the adrenals, support the nervous system, balance the immune system. There's quite a lot that goes wrong. In fact, the whole body gets squiffed, really. So you've got to unsquiff it, really. Yeah. There is hope. Absolutely. I've seen so many people with all of those conditions get better, you know, so yeah, there is hope, really. Could be both. Could be both. I guess it depends. It's a very clear, if you got COVID, you know you got COVID. You know, if you were well until that point and then you got COVID, then you're working with all sorts of things. You know, you're working with possibly it's a nasty virus, that virus. You're dealing with the virus, and then that virus reignites other horrible viruses like Epstein-Barr, which almost everyone has, herpes viruses, cytomegalovirus. But then you've got to go back from there and say, you know, it's very interesting. Let's say, imagine you two were married, sharing a bed. Why is it that one of you got COVID and the other didn't? You know, so it's not really so much about this highly contagious virus. We come back to the environment. Why was one person's environment susceptible and one person's environment was not susceptible? So you could say, yeah, it probably was a degree, to what degree, I don't know, of adrenal fatigue or stress impacting the immune system, therefore allowing the virus to impact on the body. You know, whereas perhaps say someone else who's I don't know, let's just choose a monk, you know, like a Zen Buddhist monk, really peaceful. Perhaps that person who's really peaceful and can control their physiology, and they're even slightly separate from the craziness of the world, maybe the virus comes and goes through them, you know, because their body is strong. They're not weakened at all. Okay, well, first of all, a herbalist will initially spend an hour talking to someone, finding out all about them, and usually you can tell if the person's had quite a stressful time or not. Or but I would say, so what I was trying to get across is, first of all, with long COVID, it appears that there's massive inflammation and that there's either a reservoir or an active virus attacking the person. So that has to be dealt with. But again, you're going back to, but why is that? Why is that immune system not able to fight that? And could it be because possibly, I mean, it doesn't have to only be adrenal fatigue. It could be that, let's go back rather to stress, right? Stress might cause adrenal fatigue. Stress might, and probably does, affect the immune system and many other parts of the body. So we try to work out which part of the body of that person needs to be helped. And I can tell you that if 10 people were in this room, everybody would get a different prescription. But on the other hand, there are generalizations, you know, that I've tried to get into the book to explain that generally there is that viral load, the skewed immune system, the inflammation, the stress response, or the inability now to cope so much with stress, or how stress has negatively impacted our body, therefore making us feel more vulnerable. I do. I know a lot, and then because I suppose there's a lot in my head. You can see the herbs behind me. Um, I also forget what I know, and then I get reminded because I meet someone and it triggers that thought. But in that particular chapter, I mean, the endocannabinoid system is fascinating because I'd say it's like the mafia. It's everywhere, but you can't see it. That you can't. There isn't a structure. It's just a whole lot of receptors, and then that system is there to help us cope with stress. Although, ironically, the stress many of the receptors are on the mitochondria and on the brain, and then the stress and the inflammation distort those receptors, and therefore they can't do their job. And as I write in the book, I'm very tempted to say, well, this is how you restore your endocannabinoid system. But I've known people, patients who have been, like I write in the book, those are genuine people curled up in despair and fatigue and pain. They're in no position to be trying to restore their endocannabinoid system. They need something now, which is CBD. And now it's legal, yay. And you want to get a very good quality product, which I've written about there. But then after that, I talk about, joy, chocolate, fantastic, and then the cedar that you were describing, that is, why not put it in hemp seed oil and have a beautiful massage, or even if you don't have a partner, or if you can't afford a massage, because there are a lot of people who can't afford all these things. So I've brought them into the book, self-help, using your own foot massage. Just do a little foot massage for yourself and pull on some lovely cozy socks. And those essential oils, they go from the sole of your feet right into your body. All these things are kindnesses that you do to yourself, and they help you to feel nourished and to be restored. Well, I'll tell you because I live in a very beautiful place now, but I used to work in London, and this is 55 miles from London, so it would take me an hour and 3/4 to get to London and back to my clinic in London back. So I would be absolutely exhausted. So let's imagine it's a winter's night, the rain is horizontal, and I'm driving for nearly 2 hours in the dark after a long day. I'd come home so tired. And so, because this is how many people live their life, okay? So what would I do? I would get some food and I'd pop it in the oven. I always make my own food. So I would pop it in the oven. I can cook very quickly. So 10 minutes, put everything together in the oven. Then I would go upstairs and I would run a bath and I would put in my oils and I'd lie in the bath and I might read a beautiful book. And then I'd come downstairs, I'd eat, because I live on my own, you see. I don't have a family to look after. So come downstairs, I would eat something. This is imagining it's winter. I would have also probably come in the door and lit the fire, because that's nice. So and then I might lie in front of the fire and put on some of that ambient music, that I told you about, and just lie there in complete silence with that gentle music and just think, oh, this is divine, and then I'd go and read a book and go to bed. That would be a weekday night. During the weekend, or now, because I work from home, so I don't have to do that, I live right there is my garden and my hedge, and then there are fields and forests and things. So I might go and visit some horses. I love horses. I might go and talk to the cows. There's some squirrels and birds there that I look at. I maybe go to a market, just things that people have always done, walk in the forest, see friends. I don't tend to go out much at night because I still have this residual fatigue always. And I find at nighttime, I'm just done, so I hardly ever talk to anyone at night. I mean, if I'm with my partner, then he loves going out at night, then we go out at night. But when I'm on my own, I don't tend to do that. So I just sort of batten down the hatches at night. Yeah, of course. Anything is possible. Absolutely anything is possible. If I tell you, well, I mean, the fact that I'm a medical herbalist is a complete miracle. Now, I wanted to be when I was living in South Africa. It was a medieval concept, you know, and even if I'd known you could do the course, I didn't think I could ever possibly afford it, and yet here I am. Really, anything is possible. But I think the key is it's not focusing on what we don't want. We have to think. I say to everybody, you must dream. Dream your biggest dream. What is it that you would love to have? Because this is how the book ends, with eustress, where ironically, even though I'm talking about how bad stress is, the final chapter I talk about good stress. And that is where you have in front of you a goal of what you want for your life. They call it a valued goal. And I've done this many times, and things I never dreamed I could do or be. I have my valued goal. It's like a mountain. I can't imagine how I'm going to get there. But then I go from dreaming to plotting. And I think, well, if I were to get there, how would I get there? And I think, well, I'd do that and that and that and that. And then I take the courage to make that first step. And I remember when I was in third year, because herbal medicine is a 4-year course. When I passed third year, I remember dropping onto the ground and thinking, oh, I'm actually going to be a medical herbalist. I couldn't believe it, you know? So this was an unattainable goal for me, impossible. And yet, and I've had many, you know, I mean, I remember when I first came to London and I went to Watkins Bookshop. It was the best shop in London. I loved it. It was still is my favorite shop in London. Well, I would never have dreamt that I'd be an author, beyond my wildest dreams, you know, and it happens. So you can be anything you want to be, anything. You've just got to dream, and then you've got to work towards it, you know. It doesn't just land on your lap, but you just start plotting and planning and scheming and doing your spells and getting there, and you get there. Oh, thank you. Thanks for that. My website is Botanica Medica. So people can find me through that. Or I suppose just Google my name, Jo Dunbar, medical herbalist, and I'll easily pop up then. Actually, you can't buy those through the website. I put them up there. It looks like you can, but you can't. It's just an example. In a way, it's just an example of things actually that I used to have when I had a shop. And the reason you can't buy is because this is really important. Herbs can interact with medicines. And so I like to know the person I'm selling something to. I want to know which medicines they are and what their condition is, because I've got to be careful that nothing ever happens, nothing dangerous ever happens. So I know people may sell on the internet, but I never will. But it doesn't matter. You just phone me up or you send me a text. Hi, Jo, I'd like to buy whatever. And I'll say, sure, you can buy it. Or maybe I make something special for them. Or sometimes I say, look, you know, really, you do need a consultation. Would you like to do that? I'll never push anyone to it. I'll just say that would be a far better option. But yeah, that's how I do it. But yeah, it's, I suppose, a bit misleading, but it's not meant to be misleading about the products. I do. Well, it's not so much retreats. I do workshops myself, or myself and my partner. We do workshops, yes, sort of sporadically, because we both have very, very busy lives. So when we think, oh, there's some space, then we'll do a workshop. But it's yeah, sporadically, really. I put it on my website, or I tell you what people might enjoy. I write a newsletter, and in the newsletter, I talk about, you know, like the turmeric butter that you mentioned, Carl, that sort of thing. I give all sorts of recipes, tips. I talk about, I have a little bit that I call Tales from My Garden, which is all about the birds and the animals who come and go, because people seem to like hearing about that. And, you know, the horses. I was giving some herbs to horses just this weekend, and this horse made me laugh because he quickly worked up that if he nudged my, look, if I'm pouring some herbs, if he nudged my arm just at the right moment, he got a double dose. so that made me laugh. So I put that sort of thing in my newsletter because I like people to feel happy, you know. So I think the newsletter might be something people would enjoy, I hope. Yeah, I didn't want people to feel like this is beyond them. It's not. It's for everybody, but it's sciencey. It is science. It's got some science in, but you know, it's as you say, easily digestible. Sarah, yeah. Thank you.
Bye.